most teens, and I think a lot of parents too, in my experience, a lot because we do a lot of parent coaching. Our model is a family model, and there's an assumption that like teaching, being taught to in the classroom, equates to learning, and that's just not true. Right? We
Right.
can teach all we want. We can tell our kids, talk at them until they're blue in the face, until we're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, if they're not flipped on, activated, engaged for themselves on their own terms, if they're not feeling interested or stimulated or like their brain is being challenged, then you can be the best teacher in the world. But the student's not, if they're not tapped into themselves as a learner, it's not really going to matter.
I'm Summer.
And I'm Mike.
And we got married with children.
It's been 12 years since we got this gang together.
And we're still running the rapids of living with a blended family.
And sometimes that is just not easy.
If you're looking for support and tools when it comes to divorce, step-parenting, co-parenting, and giving it your best,
you're in the right place.
We're talking about everything.
You ready to get this party started?
Always.
Hello, Everything Always family, and welcome to another episode. It is going to be awesome. So a lot of our episodes are focused around the challenges that come with being in a blended family, that come with co-parenting, being a step parent, all of those things that you face on a daily basis, right? Well, amongst all of this, you're a parent, whether you're a step parent, bio parent, both, you're a parent, and you've got some concern about your kids, and especially when it comes to reaching their full potential. So today we're talking with an expert, and we're talking about teaching versus learning. And we're doing a paradigm shift, which is one of my favorite things to do, because we're going to talk about what they're learning, how they're learning in school, and is it really the best way for them to build confidence and to see what their capabilities are and to reach the potential that is inside of them? Do they even know what that is? Well, we're talking about how they can realize that potential and how you as parents can really help foster that and get them to feeling more engaged with learning instead of, oh my gosh, this is such a pain in the butt. I don't want to do this. It's so boring. Why do I even need this? And all those frustrations that many of us as parents have heard when it comes time for homework or going to school or, hey buddy, what did you learn today? Nothing. It was super boring. And really paying attention to the things that get kids excited. So today's guest is Kelsey Komorowski, and she is the founder of Como Consulting. She has got a fabulous, amazing team of people that have come together to really teach kids skills, and not only teach the kids, but teach the parents as well. We are talking about so much good stuff today. There are like a gazillion takeaways, but it's so good. And there's so many eye-opening moments in my conversation today with Kelsey. So I think you're really going to like this, especially if you've got children that have struggled with grades in school and have put so much pressure on themselves and have a lower self-esteem because of their performance in school and have put so much importance on those grades and have really made themselves a certain identity because of how they perform in school and how they compare themselves to other students. You'll also really like this if you have kids that do well in school and have good grades and have a history of acing all of the tests. However, they're not really excited about it. They just happen to do well. You can't really see what their potential is and what they're really excited about. Today's episode is all about that and getting your kids, helping your kids to learn how to problem solve, to understand what skill building really is, and just rethinking the role of educators and teachers and ourselves as parents and what we play in their life and how we can help them realize that, oh my gosh, you're an amazing person and you've actually been judging yourself and pitting yourself up against this unrealistic ideal that isn't really what your potential is supposed to be at all. So how do we get kids to see all those amazing things that they are? That's what we're talking about today. I freaking love conversations like this, because conversations like this with people who are actually changing the world, transforming the world, making the world a better place by actually starting with kids and starting with us as human beings and looking at how we can impact our kids while also impacting ourselves and having a huge impact on the family, which totally impacts the world. I love this kind of stuff. It's so good. I probably got goosebumps about 20 different times during this interview, and I think you're going to love it too. Enjoy.
Hello, Kelsey, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Summer. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, we were just speaking a little bit before we started this, and you were excited about the fact that I love that we're going to be talking about a paradigm shift. And the reason I get excited about that is because I think that that's when people really start to pay attention, when it's something that they have been so conditioned to think one certain way, and then they open up their mind to think a different way. And that's what we get to do today. And it's all around allowing your kids and enabling your kids to reach their fullest potential.
Yes, 100%. And it made me laugh, because normally when we use terms like that, paradigm shift, especially with a lot of our work with a lot of teams, of course, and I tend to get that look like, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
Yeah. So to have this platform and your excitement around discussing, because it's so critical, and nothing changes unless we talk about it pretty, systematically and explicitly. So.
Oh,
yeah.
For sure. And, I have to say, and our audience knows this, I'm a marketer, so I'm a marketing geek, and I know that these are the type of things to get people to pay attention to really important messages. So that's another reason why I was gung-ho about this. So before we dive into all of this great stuff that we are going to be talking about, can you give a little bit of a background of why you do this and how, like, when you became aware of, this teaching versus learning thing needs to be thought of differently?
Oh my goodness, Summer, that's such a great question. And I'm going to try to keep my answer brief, because there's a lot there. Like, for me, to put it as succinctly as I can, I have not experienced anything as fulfilling and rewarding as witnessing somebody go from, I don't know, or I feel dumb, or I can't do this, to, oh, okay, I get it now. And to feeling empowered and smart and confident. It's my favorite thing in the world. And, there's a lot of, I think, buzzwords thrown around with education. We talk about the transformative power of learning, but when you see what that looks like in practice for another human to tap into a part of themselves that they hadn't known was there before, it's magical. And in my experience.
I'm totally getting goosebumps because of that. I know that feeling. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. So that's the short answer as far as, like, why teaching over learning, why learning over teaching. And I'll just give a little more context if that's okay, Summer.
Yes, please.
Okay. So I was working with the Ministry of Education. I worked in their Student Achievement Division. And my job, this was many years ago now, before I branched out on my own, but it played an important part in it, because my job was basically collecting and analyzing data on student success initiatives and looking at, hey, what's working to bridge achievement gaps or what's not. And the focus, there's a lot of, again, dialogue around learning and learner outcomes and learner-centered, instruction. But then at the end of the day, in practice, when you actually talk to teenagers, and some actually don't know, how old are your kids, if I can ask?
So we range from 14 to 18.
Okay, so
14,
your kids
16,
are
16 and 18. Yeah,
yeah, your kids are right in the wheelhouse of most teens that we work with. And, like, so I'm sure, if you ask them about school or learning, like, the average teen, they're not feeling like they're fueling their own education and that they're completely immersed in this transformative experience. For the most part, they're like, it's fine, cool, okay, like, I don't like math, I've got to do this. It's a very, most students have a quite blasé attitude towards school.
Yeah.
Would you say, is that the case in your household, or are your kids a part of the minority that are, like, genuinely engaged and loving school already?
No, it's very interesting to me when there's certain activities or experiences that happen that they get excited to learn, and you get excited about what they're learning. But then, like you just said, it's like this it's like boring. It's like, why do I have to do this? When am I ever going to need this? It's that kind of a mindset.
Totally. And that's where when we focus on teaching, and like that's what school really is for, right? Like that's what teachers do. They're delivering curriculum. That's their job, is to teach. But the problem there is most teens, and I think a lot of parents too, in my experience, a lot, because we do a lot of parent coaching. Our model is a family model. And there's an assumption that like teaching, being taught to in the classroom, equates to learning. And that's just not true. Right? We can teach all we want. We can tell our kids, talk at them until they're blue in the face, until we're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, if they're not flipped on, activated, engaged for themselves on their own terms, if they're not feeling interested or stimulated, or like their brain is being challenged, then you can be the best teacher in the world. But the student's not, if they're not tapped into themselves as a learner, it's not really going to matter.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's so true. So what can we do as parents? Because, parents are going, well, what can I do about this though? My kid has to go to school. How do I make sure that they're going to be interested? Right. It's like,
yeah. Summer, I'm laughing because it's like, yeah, most parents I talk to, they're like, okay, these are great words to help me. Like, how can I actually like help my kid feel this stuff? Oh my goodness. So on a sidebar, I have a full webinar and training literally dedicated to that. We walk through kind of like shifts and steps in way more in depth. So I don't know, Summer, at the end, I can talk about that, or I can send you the link for it. Yes. That's like a super in-depth, it's like a 50-minute training. But the short of the long, like there's a few kind of requisites in order to facilitate the type of change that is meaningful and sustainable, right? So at the end of the day, like number one is understanding what school is for and what it's not for. And school, the way that we view it, schoolwork is just a vehicle. Right? It doesn't matter if it's math or Shakespeare. And like we work very closely with a lot of teachers. I love teachers. I have teachers on my team. They don't love it when I say this, but it's so true. I'm like, it doesn't matter what you're being taught. All it boils down to is how you're learning. Yeah. So that right there, when they understand conceptually, schoolwork is a vehicle. It is not, because then you have kids, right, where it's like, I'm never going to have to use this, like blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you're right, you might not, but that's not the point. Every assignment, whether you like it or not, whether you're interested or not, every math sheet, every test, every essay, it's just an opportunity to practice, right? To explore what kind of thinker or learner or communicator or time manager do we want to be? At the end of the day, that's all the schoolwork is for. So when they can kind of have that mindset shift where they can actually connect with themselves as a learner first, and then using their schoolwork, as this playground really, to figure out who they want to be and what kind of, again, thinker, learner, student should be the most boring part of their journey, to be honest. So that's first and foremost, just that kind of conceptual clarity. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. So I guess the question I'm having right now is this something, because you said you work with teachers. So I'm guessing this is changing the way that they're working with their students while still fulfilling the curriculum that they're required, right, to teach?
Oh, so Summer, that's a great question. The short answer is no. So we work closely with teachers in our capacity as educators, bridging the gap between classroom teaching and at-home learning. So down the line, like longer term, and actually for this academic year, it's part of something that we really want to make happen, is partnering with schools and actually delivering our curriculum. We're in talks with a few schools in the States to make this happen, to actually be delivering our skill building curriculum in the classroom. But historically, and again, I worked in government, I get like the red tape for partnering with schools and for making that sort of thing happen is quite formidable. So our model, we work directly with families. Right. So on my team, it's all different sorts of educators. We have PhDs, we have teachers, and we're working with families outside of the classroom.
Ah, okay. Mm-hmm. So, and what does that look like? Like what's kind of that transformation that's happening? Like where are families, at the beginning, what's the reason that they're like, we want to work with you? And then what's kind of the journey and the transformational place that they end up at?
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. So I think the best way I can answer this is to give kind of the profiles of like the typical families. And you might, Summer, you'll have to tell me if you recognize yourself in any of these. Yeah. So yeah, the one that we get, I think the most often, it's families, it's where students have been struggling for years with school, like just stress and struggle, whether it's with, low grades or low confidence, feeling stupid, feeling stuck. These are families where by the time they find us, unfortunately, they're like basically out of hope, which is a tough thing to say, but I hear it a lot with a lot of moms, a lot of tears on these calls that we have, where it's just like, I don't know what to do. Most of these families have tried tutoring, they've tried counseling, they've tried, neurofeedback, they've tried executive functioning coaching. They're like, we've tried everything, but none of those things are addressing, and again, we obviously we do diagnostics for our kids to make sure, hey, can we actually help them? But for the ones we have, it's like, yeah, all those things didn't work because your child still doesn't have the skills and strategies to manage and engage in their work, right?
Yeah.
And people don't do, and this isn't just teenagers, this is humans, right? Some are like you and I, like, we're not going to be excited to do stuff that we don't know how to do, right? That
exactly.
That makes us feel stupid. Like, we're going to be like, no, thank you, I don't like that thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. You always push away the things that make you feel bad about yourself.
Literally 100%. Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of that first profile where kids, they feel school is such a pain point in their household. And the kids are they're at the end of their rope. That's number one. The other family profile that we see a lot of, and it's interesting because it's almost the opposite, where students they're getting high grades. Nope. They don't see any problems for the most part, the teens, but mom and dad are watching being like, they're not even working, right? They're getting by, they're doing well because they're bright naturally, not because they know how to actually manage or engage in their work. And unfortunately, we see a lot of this with first year college students, like that the parents will be like, I don't understand, my kid got straight A's, like they've always been honor roll, like what's happening? And it's like, yeah, but they weren't building out the muscle, right? To like navigate more complex or challenging material, which is obviously what happens when you level up in the education system.
Yes. I'm seeing, and just to answer your question earlier, because we've got, out of 4, there's all different personalities, right? And each do differently in school. And I can see all of that, the student that does well because it, maybe it comes a little bit easier. Maybe there's a lot of memorization in there. Maybe there's a lot, but is it exciting? Is it fulfilling? Not sure. Then I know the struggle, the low self-esteem because something feels just totally hard. And it seems like there's the only way to do it. This is the way. And if you don't do well on the test, then this is who you are. And if you don't do well on this homework assignment, then this is who you are. It's like, there's like no other way of evaluating or like saying, no, this is why you're awesome, not because of how you did on that test.
Oh, it's so true. And I love so much, Summer, what you just said about this is who you are, because it's one of the most, I think that's not talked about enough. Yeah. That identity piece. And like really like students, how they like for teenagers, how they identify themselves, right? Smart or dumb or whatever. It's almost always tethered to grades and it's almost always inaccurate.
And it's so sad because it stifles the potential that they have because they're judging themselves based on something that really has no business determining who they are.
100%. And Summer, that actually, and this kind of speaks to your earlier question, it's not something I tend to broadcast because I feel like I get strange looks, but I'm going to with you. It's something like, that's something that actually keeps me up at night when I think about, and I see this literally every single day, where students have no idea what they are truly capable of. They have no idea what their brain can do. And I just think, I'm like, imagine if 13, 14, 15-year-olds, like even if like 50% of them in the United States alone were able to understand and step into their full potential. Can you imagine what kind of world we could live in?
Exactly. Yes.
Like it's staggering to think about the implications of all of this untapped potential. And the worst part is just that for most students, they have no idea it's there until somebody shines a big bright light on it.
Right. Right. Oh my gosh. It's kind of like, I don't know if this is the right analogy or not, but it's kind of like taking two people and putting them into a dance class, say. One of them picks it up so easily and the other one just doesn't. It's just a harder thing to do. But based on that performance, you are good, you are not good.
Yep. I love that analogy. And you know what? I'm going to take it one step further because this is something that a lot of our students, when they first come to us, there can be a great deal of stigma and shame when it comes to getting help, right? A lot of them, they might know that they need help objectively and intellectually, but, are embarrassed.
Yeah.
And so what we like to tell them, it's like school is an activity like anything else. And like to go to your dance example, say, imagine one person learned the techniques for how to dance and the other person didn't. Like, who's going to do better? And it's the same with school. If you don't know how to learn, if you don't know how to do all of the foundational competencies required to succeed in an academic setting, like to me, it's nonsense that we expect our kids to do well, but we do not show them how.
Yes.
Hey guys, did you know that you can text us now? Like if you want to be the first to know if we're going live or just launched a new episode, or maybe that we just went out on a date or had a fight, who's right, who's wrong, maybe we ate too much for dinner or missed a workout. No, seriously, we want to share more of what's going on in our lives, and we want to make sure that you don't miss out on anything new. So send a quick hello to 760-389-3722, and let's stay connected. All right, back to the show.
Okay, now we're getting into the journey of how we show them how.
Yeah, so the journey, the transformation.
Yeah.
Totally. So, there's a few ways, Summer, tell me what would be the most helpful, because there's a few ways to talk about this. Like on the one hand, I like every week we get emails from our parents and sometimes our students, but mostly our parents, talking about what they're seeing, the changes that they're seeing. And to me, that's where the value of that, because it's, it takes a lot of effort and energy, obviously, right? Like our kids, when we're working with them and our parents, because we work with them too, they're really showing up for themselves in big ways. So I guess the question is, do we want to talk like the strategies around that, or do we want to talk about like what that journey can look like as far as what changes?
Yeah. It's almost like I want to do a little bit of both. I kind of feel like we'll answer both as we talk about it, but okay. I think the big burning question is, it's kind of hard to look at what you're doing at home and knowing what you could be doing different to encourage them or to create those challenges or to make it something that's exciting for them, instead of, and I'm probably not using the correct terminology here, but how can they be thriving instead of just getting by and going through the motions? Like, what can we do as parents to facilitate that? Because if you think about it, most of us, if our kids are going through this, we probably went through it too as students. So how do we know what to do differently, and I probably can't go through all of them, but what are some examples of things that we can do versus what we might be doing? And by the way, I just want to say too, we know that you listening are good, amazing parents that love your children so much. So none of this is like, you're doing this wrong or that. It's more about, how can you, it's like empowering you to really help your children and do it in a way that's different.
Yeah, I second that 100%. Everything shared here is based on what, at least that I'm about to share, is based on what we've seen, right? Yeah, like what we've seen works for families versus not. So, oh my goodness, Summer, there's so much there. Let's see. I think that the first thing I'll point out, I'll just run through a couple of things, all right? And you stop me or ask questions if I get off track. So the first thing, there's this idea, it's a misconception that student achievement is about the student only. And that's not true. Student achievement does not exist in a vacuum. How students learn and achieve, how our kids understand themselves as learners is greatly shaped by household dynamics, okay? Yeah. So learning is very much a family endeavor. Okay, that's just first and foremost. I talk with a lot of parents where they're like, okay, so take my kid for a few weeks and, teach them how to learn. It's like, for sure, we'll do that. For sure. Like, yes, we'll teach your kid how to learn, but also we're going to work with you to model out what that looks like, because, the sooner parents and kids can build a shared vocabulary around what kind of culture of learning they want to bring into the house, right? Around the skills that they value, right, for themselves, the sooner we can start to actually see the conversations and then the behaviors that result in that like very meaningful and sustainable change. Okay. So that's just first and foremost. Parents, you matter. You absolutely are critical in your child's learning. And then I think this goes into the other, you mentioned, Summer, everyone listening is I would think and assume like a fantastic parent. Every parent I work with is like a super mom. It's true. Mostly it's moms, if I'm being honest. Sorry, Michael, he's not here, but it's mostly moms that I'm talking with. And it's actually, I'll back up for a second because just for some context, for the first few years of the work that we do, we catered our service delivery to students. So we worked with students like uniquely. Obviously, we talked with parents, but all of our work was done with the students. A couple of years ago, because I kept observing parents with the best intentions, just unintentionally saying things or doing things that would really undermine their kids' learning. And I was like, I wonder what would happen if we involved parents in this process. And I launched a pilot, and I'm big on data, right? I'm like, if we try something, if it works, that's great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. Either way, we'll know. Yeah. And man, Summer, when we involved parents into this process, into the skill building process, like the outcomes, it stunned me. I would not have even honestly dreamed that it could make such a difference. We went from like helping students, right? And obviously helping them feel smarter and more confident and build out these skills and get higher grades, to hearing like staggering family transformations. Wow. like reconfiguring household dynamics. So I say that as context to really understand the value of viewing learning and skill building as a collaborative endeavor. And then I'll go into number 2 here. And this is something that I think like 95% of our parents find to be challenging. Most parents, because you're amazing, want to see your kids happy, right? And a lot of parents want to solve their kids' problems. Yep. And what we know, and I'm not talking about things with like, well-being or physical safety, of course not. But when it comes to school and learning, it's the worst thing you can do. Your job as a parent when it comes to school and learning is not to solve their problems. It is to give them space and tools so that they can learn how to solve problems for themselves.
I love that so much. I think that is the best skill that you can have.
Absolutely. It's the autonomy, the agency, the self-confidence. It's all bound up in knowing that you can navigate whatever is coming at you, and including failure. Right? Like sometimes like we work with families, and I don't know if you've experienced this in your home, where parents will be like, like almost like confessing, being like, I stayed up with him and I didn't do his work for him, but I didn't not to make sure that he got it in, and it's like, because they don't want them to fail. But it's like, you know what? Think about when you put on that kind of zoomed out perspective of like, no, let them, if they're going to fail, now is the best time. It's low stakes when they get out into the real world. And I've worked with my fair share of college age students who they can't stand on their own 2 feet, Summer. And it's so upsetting, like for everybody. Right.
Yes. Well, I have a quick story that makes me think of this. Yes. So I know that feeling of when your child has a problem, something's going on, and you just want to fix it because you hate seeing your child in pain, right? Every parent, it's like the worst, and you just want to fix it as soon as you can. And I remember learning so the kids were in elementary school, and my son was probably in 2nd or 3rd grade. And he had this project that he had done, and he was always very, it was always very important to him because he's a rule follower. So he had worked on it. He totally worked on this project, and I had dropped him off, and the next thing I know is that he had left his project at home. Or no, he was in the car, and he said, I left my project at home. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And school is starting. And so I quickly had this whole run through in my brain. And I was like, this could be the hardest thing for me ever, but it could be a really, really good lesson at a time that is going to feel critical for him, but it's not that big of a deal, in the big scheme. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I said, oh no. And he was like, can you go get it and bring it back? And I was like, I got to go to a meeting. Like, I'm not going to be able to. And he's like, can you email my teacher? Can you tell her? And I can tell he's like panicking. And I just literally what I wanted to do was go back and be like, yep, I'm getting it. I'll have it to you before you have that class. Like, that's what I wanted to do.
Of course.
But then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to just like suffer through the knots in my stomach. And I'm just going to test this out. And I remember I had called a friend like on the way home, and she was just like, you're a mean mom. You're so mean. I can't believe I could never do that. And I'm like, but I think it's going to be a good lesson. I think it's going to, that probably does sound, I'm sure people listening are just like, that is so mean. But it was just like, it wasn't the end of the world. And what he ended up doing is talking to the teacher himself. And the teacher actually was just so proud that he didn't have mom email in and say, oh, by the way, she was very proud that he spoke to her himself. And it actually turned out to be a really good learning lesson that I don't regret. I mean, I was totally questioning it on my way home and I had this big knot, but he didn't do like, it became important to him now. When something's important and I forget it, like I have to make sure I'm not going to forget it, because then there's the other side where there's kids where I've seen it's like, okay, you're at soccer practice. I forgot my shoes, or I forgot this, I forgot that. And the parents are just running back and forth, always picking up fixing all of those mistakes. And I'm like, well, then it's going to keep happening. You're kind of teaching the lesson of, I can totally mess up because mom and dad's always going to be there to make it right.
That's exactly what that communicates. And also, Summer, like, hats off to you, because I can only imagine, I would like, I don't know if heartbreak is too strong a word, but I can so imagine that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but you did it. Kind of feel it and go, oh, it's almost like you want to go back and like, oh, I could not relive that moment. I felt so, so terrible just watching him walk in, knowing that there's got to be like this devastating feeling. But it turned out to be a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's actually like such a vivid and wonderful example of exactly what we're talking about, right? Where it's like, you're not, it's not like you sent him to school without like his, diabetes medication or something like that. Right. We're not talking about that.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the lesson learning for himself. Can I ask, how old was he? Did you say he was like third grade?
It was like second or third grade. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say kudos to you for that. That's a big parenting win for sure. And honestly, Summer too, this is going back to your question from before about the how, but like that, again, I'm going to use that example because it's such a good one. We find a lot of the work we do with parents is helping them, introspect about their own behaviors and their own patterns. And, there's not a small correlation between, how many times did you check your kid's platform this week? And like, how at peace do you feel? How was your relationship with your kid this week? Like, it's not a coincidence that those things are related.
Yeah, totally. And it's so interesting, we've all seen, if you've been at schools and you've been with other parents, you can see the different, the some that are just kind of relaxed about things, some that are just like stressing about every single project, every single test, every single piece of homework, all these things, and I wonder that myself too. I'm like, gosh, you're so stressed out already about work. And now this, and now that, like, I don't see where the win is. Like I would say, ask yourself, like, what is this actually accomplishing besides a good letter grade for someone that maybe didn't entirely earn that letter grade because it wasn't all of their work. It wasn't all of their execution.
Mm-hmm, totally. And I think it's so easy, or at least it's just very prevalent, to be sucked in without even really being aware of it, into these self-defeating patterns of behaviors where it's like, exactly, why are we doing this? What is the value? Who is this actually helping or hindering?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about examples of problem solving, because I love this so much. That's the biggest thing is that I try to encourage. And I don't know that I do a great job at it, because I think I'm sure there's times where I've made it too easy. And then there's times maybe I've made it too hard, I think, but I'd love to talk about that, because here's what I do know. I do know that the times that I have put it back on my kids to solve a problem that they're struggling with, no matter if they're having a tantrum or this isn't fair, or I'm upset about this friend situation or this homework assignment or whatever's going on, and they look to me to fix it. The times that I have not, and just sat there and just bit my tongue and watched them go through their own struggle, but then also watch them figure it out, has been amazing, because you can literally see right after that the self-esteem that has been built. There's new confidence there, even though it's so hard to watch them go through the struggle. It's so awesome to see. And then you go, and what if I hadn't done that? What a missed opportunity that would have been if I had just fixed it for them.
Yes, 100%. And that hits on a really unpopular fact. And like most of our kids don't know this, that like learning and growth can be uncomfortable. Like when we're expanding our comfort zone, like that struggle and those feelings that arise, having that perspective and that lens and that like frame of reference, internal frame of reference of like, this is normal. It doesn't mean I'm dumb. It doesn't mean I can't do it. These are feelings that can arise sometimes when we're trying to figure something out, right? When something is
Right.
challenging, and to become friends with those feelings, right? And to acknowledge their presence and like to not take it so personally, right? And we see like those conversations are so key to resilience and to like having a healthy relationship with like success or failure, things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that.
Yes. So I'm just curious because maybe people will find themselves in this, a couple of examples, maybe for parents, especially like, because I think that's a new thing for them as well, is building, I don't know what the right word is it confidence or capability maybe? I mean, we all have the capability, but realizing that you have it to be that for your kids, because there's habits that we do, as parents, there's go-tos, there's, it's just like the thing we do, we're kind of programmed, to how we handle a situation. Like you're crying at the store, I'm just going to buy the candy so you stop embarrassing me with the temper tantrum, that type of thing.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
like our
So, like,
go-tos to keep the quote unquote peace. How, like, I'm curious for you in working with parents, like you work with the kids, but then like you said, it's a family thing. There's got to be like transformations happening with the parents as well. And I'm sure there's challenges to have to change those behaviors.
Absolutely. It's such a critical part of the work. And that's something, because our program is 8 weeks, and like around week 4 or 5 usually is when we tend to hear a lot of parents sharing, being like, I can't believe how much I'm learning. Like I thought this was just going to be for school and grades. And like, it's this whole other, holistic kind of overhaul about how we're thinking and interacting. So Summer, as far as examples, like, are we talking like a couple specific like techniques to help kind of rewire how we can create that space for our kids to solve their own problems? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. Well, here's one of the, it's funny. It's simple. I don't, from what a lot of parents share with me, it's not easy. It requires practice. But one of the things I tell all of our parents is like, when you find yourself about to talk to your kid, right? To tell them something, just to take a breath and rephrase it in a question. So instead of being like, oh, I left my math book at home, or I left my math or something that they needed that they forgot, instead of being like, well, email your teacher and do this and that, taking that breath and just being like, okay, so what should we do here? What can we do here? And give them quite literally that time and space to think things through. And that can be, I've seen that sequence unfold, and we do it on our calls with our students too. You can have like 10 questions before they get there, but that's the point of modeling it out, because they're not going to build those connections unless they practice them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Questions are so good.
Oh,
just
so
asking
good.
questions.
Yeah. And the more pointed, the better. And actually that's probably the other second kind of big strategy that we've seen be really successful is co-constructing, parents and kids together, terms of engagement. That's what I call them. And this is one of those things, and I like to do it with our families at the outset, because it's like a lot of the strife and struggle for families when it comes to school can be with kids. We're hearing, stop, my parents won't get off my back, like blah, 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 I've got it. Meanwhile, the parents are like, they don't have it. Like they don't have it at all. Like they're playing video games, like, oh my God. So establishing these terms of engagement as far as like, hey, what, how happy would you be? How often would you want your mom to be asking you about school? Right? How often would you, and asking the parent, because the kid might say like, never, be like, okay, that's not realistic. So let's, keeping respect for self and for others, realistically, once a week, twice a week, what would you be happy with? And having, really mediating kind of new norms that we can test out in the home. And we just did this last week was the last one. And the student, he's a teenager, and him and his parents co-constructed these awesome terms of engagement where it's like, I think it was Tuesdays and Thursdays from like 5 to 5:45. Mom can bring her list of, you need to do X, Y, Z. and student has to show up with respect and keep his eye rolling to a minimum. And that's how they're going to start to evolve a better relationship with school. And whether that is sustainable in the long run, we'll see, but it's a starting place. So getting your very own terms of engagement and using that as a starting place, super, super helpful.
That's so great. I love that.
Yeah. It's, it's, you know what? And honestly, it's fun. I'm a huge nerd and I laugh as I say that. And most of our kids are like, it's not fun, but it can be fun, right? You bring this energy of fun to it and make it like a family experiment instead of a chore. And and really great things can come from it.
Yeah. And you know what? I think, or at least I've noticed this with our kids, when it is this like family experiment, let's try this, let's do this. It's a lot more interesting, and it does keep them engaged.
Yes. And with that too, a funny thing happens. Teenagers, I think for the most part, are so accustomed to certain power dynamics where it's like, teachers, parents, like there's these kind of deeply embedded, authority figures in their life. Right. But when you invite them and you kind of just like address them, and again, I always qualify, we're not talking about well-being or physical safety, right? This is very much to do with school and learning. When you're addressing them as an equal, as far as like, okay, so what do you think? Like, what should we do? And let them lead the brainstorming and cheerlead them on and really get excited and enthusiastic about whatever it is that they're sharing to give them confidence, right? To articulate what they actually want for themselves. It's so cool. And to your point earlier, Summer, like you can really just see kids that, their faces can light up, right? You see them brighten at like, oh, I get like, I'm being invited to lead this stuff, like, and to make these decisions. That's cool.
Yeah. So that actually is leading me into things that you have seen, and also how this allows them to see potential that they didn't know they had.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. I guess, I'm going to share an example. It's a pretty simple one, but I think it captures the answer there. One of our students recently, she had filled out, I guess we'll call it a project, right? It was like multiple worksheets. There was a lot to it. And she'd been struggling, but she's like, I really think I did my best. And we took a look at it, and it was very evident that the questions weren't answered in full. And this is the work as it was not going to get a very good grade. And, so we're asking, and we're not telling about like, you need to fix X, Y, and Z. That's not how we do it, right? We're asking, okay, well, let's look at the question, and we're deconstructing guidelines, and we're using some of our very simple strategies, right? To make sure that we can complete our assignments properly. And she had never used, even just as far as reading the prompt and deconstructing what was actually being asked, right? What specifically did she have to speak to in her answer? She'd never done that exercise. And
wow.
And she did it, and she saw it, and she was like, she was excited. She was like, I've never done that before. I've never seen that. It's so much easier. And I was like, it is easier. And we were geeking out about it. And she was so excited. And she proceeded to do that with all the rest of her questions. And she got the highest grade she'd ever gotten. And it was like, she was just so excited. And I think that's the essence. They don't know what they don't know, right? They're looking at it and they're seeing like, well, I've done the best I can. If they have no idea about tools or strategies that exist to actually improve their own thinking, to improve their engagement with the material, and don't get me wrong too, Summer, like kids, even those who might seem unmotivated, kids like to feel smart. Okay. Like we said earlier, like just like we gravitate away from things that make us feel bad or that we don't know how to do, we gravitate towards things that make us feel good, that make us feel smart. It's the same with school. When they know how to do it, they have these strategies where they're like, and they feel smart. You won't need to worry about self-motivation. They're going to want to do it because they like the feeling.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, it's so true. And then you welcome more challenges. You welcome the like, oh, I bet I could do this. And instead of worrying about, the more like success you have with overcoming things, the more it becomes exciting. And of course, I mean, the natural byproduct of that is reaching more potential and discovering things that you didn't even know you were capable of.
Yes. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful upward cycle. And it's quite literally the opposite of like the vicious, tormenting cycle that so many students are currently stuck in, and parents, where it's just like the negative self-talk and bad outcomes. And it's just like this vicious cycle. But no, that's exactly what you described. It's so awesome. And every kid, every person really deserves that.
Oh yeah. So going back to what you said right at the beginning, it's like, can you imagine the impact on the world if we could do that with our children? And it's it's a very fun thing to do. It's not hard. It's way easier, actually. It just sounds like way easier than what we've been accustomed to doing.
Yeah. And that's where that paradigm shift comes in, right? It's like, if we're using the same tools and the same ways of thinking to address the same problems, like it's the same stuff, right? We're not going to break out of that cycle when we talk about that paradigm shift of different viewing, right? The nature and the role of school and learning in a very different way. That's when we can start to have that fun, because it's a totally different set of parameters.
Yes. So earlier you had mentioned a webinar, and I'd love to send our listeners there to that link. So whatever you say, by the way, and you all know, I always have all of this in the show notes, so it's easy for you to just go and click on. But can you share with us that, and like where we can find more information about the work that you do, and especially for parents that are interested in doing this with their children and with your company?
Yes, totally. Thank you, Summer. So you can find out more about us at komoconsulting.com. It's KOMO consulting.com. And actually on our website, there's like the big top bar is an invitation to watch our training. So that's also where the webinar is linked. And Summer, obviously, I'll send you the registration and all that, so you can share it with your viewers. And then I'll also highlight, we keep a certain number of slots open each week. We do learning and achievement audits. They're free. They tend to be either very fun and or very illuminating. We do a deep dive into the students' current relationship with school, with grades, with learning, and we really get clear on where they're at versus where they want to be. And then we come up with a game plan to actually help them start to get on a happier, healthier path. So there's the option there too, to book that audit. And that's just on our site, komoconsulting.com, and it's Get Started Now.
Love it. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, for what you do and how you are impacting the world and changing lives and changing families' lives. This is so incredible. And I'm so grateful for people like you. And of course, for joining me today, having this conversation and just really laying it out there on the difference that we can make with our kids. So, so good.
Thank you so much, Summer. This was so much fun, and it was such a pleasure to be on with you today. So thank you so much for hosting me.
Thank you so much for listening. And we like to say, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you love, and be bold enough to share it with someone you don't. See you next time.